So here's a question, or a variation of this question, that I get asked all the time. Should I be hopeful during the 2-week wait or in early pregnancy after a loss? Or does that make the hurt worse when things go badly? I often get variations of this where women don't want to visualize baby during the 2-week wait or even visualize once they're pregnant because they feel like that makes the hurt worse if they miscarry or if they get their period. And I've spoken about this before, so apologies if you've heard me say this before, but I just want to say it for those of you who maybe are specifically searching for the answer to this question. I never wanted to be an expert on this. If I could be an expert on anything else in the world, I think I probably would choose it rather than being an expert on miscarriage. I would much rather be an expert on having a large family or having lots of babies. And while some days that makes me just want to shout at the universe, what the fuck? And other days I just embrace it as, well, when life gives you lemons, and you know the rest of that saying. So I share this because I've been where you are, and I know how much it sucks, and I know how much you feel alone, and I know how much some days you just want to give up because it's all too much. And if I can help one person out there, then maybe the shit that I've been through will have been worth it. So please know I share from that place. I've experienced multiple losses, multiple miscarriages, and it's really shit and it really hurts. But I want to talk about this idea of being hopeful and why I still believe that that is the better option than being on this hesitant, expecting the worst side, because I've been there too. So while I'm personally talking about feeling hopeful during pregnancy, I think it also applies to being hopeful during the 2-week wait. And while they're not exactly the same, I think those feelings of sadness and disappointment and of grief that we feel when we get our period, when we've been trying to conceive, are similar, though not exactly the same, to when we lose a baby. And I don't want to diminish your experience if you've lost a baby, but I also don't want to diminish your experience if you're going through that trying to conceive cycle, because you're still so hopeful, you're still wanting and yearning for a baby. So while I'm going to be talking about losing a baby and being hopeful during early pregnancy, I think the same is true, the same experience is true, and I think you should still be hopeful during that 2-week wait as well. So hopefully you can relate to what I'm sharing. So when we're talking about whether we should be hopeful or whether we should err on that hesitant, not sure, we'll see what happens, kind of expecting the worst side, I've done all of them. So in my 3rd pregnancy, which ended up being my first experience of loss, I didn't expect to lose that baby. I had had 2 pregnancies that were very normal, progressed smoothly, and resulted in 2 beautiful, healthy boys. And even though I had experience of loss prior to this, my sister had lost a baby at 22 weeks, and I was with her at the ultrasound. That one still gets me. Even though I had had that experience, for some reason, because it wasn't my own experience, I wasn't expecting or I wasn't feeling any anxiety during that 3rd pregnancy. And then it all went wrong and I lost him at 16 weeks. And I was devastated. I was broken. I didn't know how I would ever get over that. And yet I still had that longing for another baby. So there was an experience of feeling no anxiety during pregnancy and being as hopeful as ever and imagining our life with that baby and imagining what it would be like to have 2 under 2 and feeling utterly devastated when it happened. And then I've had a pregnancy following this loss where I felt so incredibly anxious and I didn't let myself connect with the baby, and I erred on the side of hesitant and imagined all the worst case scenarios. And I literally would say to people, yeah, I'm pregnant, but you know what happened last time, we'll see. Like I really almost played the pregnancy down, like didn't get excited, didn't imagine life with that baby. And then at 10 weeks, I went to an ultrasound and there was no heartbeat and I lost another one. And I was utterly devastated, even though I had held back, even though I had tried to protect my heart. I was utterly devastated. The pain was just as bad, except not only did I have the pain of losing a baby, but I'd also had 10 weeks of anxiety and imagining all those worst case scenarios, and now I had to live the worst case scenario. So I guess the experience of suffering was worse because I had played all those worst case scenarios for such a long time and then experienced it. And then I've also experienced having previous losses, having healthy babies, dealing with the anxiety. So I'm not saying you can't feel anxious. I'm not saying that you can either be hopeful or anxious. You can be both, but I think it's really worth putting the energy into being hopeful. So I've had an experience where I've dealt with the anxiety and I've talked myself off the ledge daily when I felt anxious, and I've allowed myself to connect with the baby because I know that it's better to have some time connecting with that baby and loving on that baby than it is to have whatever time you do get feeling super anxious and imagining the worst case. So I've let myself connect. I've let myself feel hopeful. I've done all the practices I know of to create that feeling of hopefulness and connection in my body and to reduce the anxiety. And I've lost that baby too. And I was devastated. Was I more devastated than either of the two previous scenarios? No. The only difference is I gave myself that time in that pregnancy, feeling connected, feeling hopeful, feeling love and joy. And I wouldn't change that for the world. Whether you get the healthy baby at the end or whether you get the shitty result feels the same. Whether that be your period arriving because you're not pregnant, or whether that be you lose a baby. I still think the pain of losing a baby or the pain of not being pregnant is just as bad. Whether you allowed yourself to get hopeful, whether you allowed yourself to visualize that baby, to connect with that baby, is just as bad. The only difference is you gave yourself that time to experience love, to experience joy, to experience hope. And I know that time after time, it's really hard to do it. And sometimes, yes, you need to take a break because you're feeling so down and you need to pour back into you and you need to write that happy list. I've spoken about the happy list before, and it's just something that I did to refocus me on feeling good and happy in my life when I've been feeling super low. And yes, at first you won't feel like it, but that might be what you need to do. If you aren't able to connect with that hope, you might need some space, a little bit of a break. Fill yourself back up before you approach it again. Because it is an act of bravery. Trying to conceive when it hasn't been working, when you're on a fertility journey, when you've got this list of reasons why it's not going to work. Or going into a pregnancy after a long fertility journey is an act of bravery. Or going into an early pregnancy after a loss or after multiple losses is an act of bravery. And you need to have strength and you need to have hope in order to go into that. And I want to tell you, if you're not feeling that right now, do what you need to do to get back to that place of hope. Watch videos like this. Practice yoga with me. Do some meditation with me. Write your happy list. Do all those things that make you feel good and grounded and like you, and you in a good place. Because it's really hard to get yourself into a positive place when that anxiety comes up and when there's a lot at stake, if you're not already in a good place. I don't know if this has helped at all. I don't even know if my rationale for why I believe you should feel hopeful makes sense. It makes sense to me, in my body. That is the truth. That if I have to go through that experience, I want to be hopeful and I want to be joyful and I want to enjoy every minute of it. Instead of robbing myself of that time, whether that be 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever you get, if you end up with a shitty result. And it obviously doesn't mean you're going to end up with a shitty result. I've also had that experience of multiple losses, and I've done the work to stay hopeful, and I got my baby at the end. And I'm so glad I didn't spend that pregnancy in a super negative place. I'm so glad that I got to enjoy what I got to enjoy. And no, it wasn't perfect. I still struggled with anxiety daily. I still had to do my practices to bring myself down. But what a lesson that was. I've learned so much about myself, about how I deal with anxiety and stress, and I'm in a better place because of it. So please do what you need to get yourself back to a hopeful, positive place. Know that you can be both hopeful and anxious at the same time, and that's okay. Know that you might swing between the two multiple times during the 2-week wait or during early pregnancy or throughout your entire pregnancy, and that's okay too. I'm sending you so much love and hope. I think you are incredibly brave and strong. Namaste.